Okay, so let's dive right into this listener question. Yeah, they sent over this financial report on AMD. Seems like they're trying to wrap their head around whether or not AMD is a good investment opportunity, especially with Nvidia making such a splash in the whole AI thing.
Yeah, that's a smart question to be asking. I mean, these companies are really at the forefront of, they're shaping the future of AI.
For sure, and that's why we're going deep on this one today. We're not just looking at numbers, we're talking about understanding, the forces that are driving this whole technological revolution.
Absolutely.
So let's kick things off with AMD's performance lately. They've reported a record $7.7 billion in revenue. That's a 133% jump from last quarter and a 24% increase year over year. I mean, those are some pretty impressive numbers.
Yeah, they are. But I think the really interesting part is where that growth is coming from. Like if we dig a little deeper, we see that it's not this, uniform success story across all of AMD's different business segments.
Yeah, so where are they hitting it out of the park and where are they maybe, striking out?
Well, their data center segment is the real star performer here. It's showing a 69% increase year over year. But then you look at their PC gaming and embedded chip segments, and those are actually shrinking.
So it seems like data centers are becoming this key battleground, especially when we talk about this whole AMD versus Nvidia thing.
Absolutely. And speaking of Nvidia, they just pulled in $3.8 billion just from their data center business last quarter. That's a 112% increase year over year. And the really wild thing is that data centers make up something like 88% of Nvidia's total revenue.
Wow, that's huge. For AMD, it's closer to 50%, right?
Right.
So Nvidia is clearly like the dominant force here. What's given them such a commanding lead?
Well, their GPUs are pretty much the industry standard for AI training and inference. So when companies need to, develop and deploy AI models, they're turning to Nvidia's hardware.
And we're not just talking about small startups here, right? We're talking about the big players.
Right. We're talking Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. These companies are investing hundreds of billions of dollars in AI infrastructure. In 2024 alone, it's projected to hit something like $300 billion. And a huge chunk of that is going towards NVIDIA's products.
It's incredible to think about how much AI is already integrated into our lives, and how much bigger it's going to get. On that note, I was reading something recently about how AI models are becoming more efficient.
Oh, yeah. That's a really important development. Companies like DeepSeek are actually running advanced language models on devices as small as a Raspberry Pi or even just a desktop VPU.
So does that mean AI is becoming more accessible to like companies that don't have the resources of a Google or an Amazon?
Exactly. And that's a big deal because it opens up so many possibilities for, smaller players. It could even lead to like totally new applications of AI that we haven't even thought of yet.
That's really fascinating. So where does AMD fit into all of this? Are they doing anything to challenge NVIDIA's dominance?
Oh, they're definitely trying. They've developed the MI300X GPU to compete with NVIDIA's H100. One of the big selling points is that the MI300X boasts a 30% performance advantage over the H100.
Okay, so AMD has a chip that's actually more powerful. That sounds promising, but I have a feeling there's more to the story, right? It can't be that simple.
Yeah, you're right. Timing is everything in this business. And the MI300X was released over a year after the H100. By that time, many companies had already, committed to NVIDIA's platform. The switching costs are significant, and the benefits of that MI300X might not be enough to convince those companies to jump ship.
Ah, I see. So it's a bit of an uphill battle for AMD.
Yeah. And to make things even tougher, NVIDIA is known for its rapid innovation cycle. They refresh their architecture annually, constantly pushing the boundaries of performance. So AMD is kind of always playing catch-up.
So it seems like AMD is stuck in this frustrating cycle of being a step behind. While they're working on the next big thing, Nvidia is already launching its Blackwell chips, which, by the way, are already selling out. Is there any way for AMD to break free from this?
That's a great question. To answer that, we need to take a closer look at AMD's overall strategy. Because beyond the technology itself, there are some fundamental challenges that AMD needs to overcome if they really want to compete with NVIDIA in this space.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are those challenges, and how do they impact AMD's prospects in the AI market?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that AMD is kind of like a jack of all trades. They make CPUs, GPUs for PCs, embedded processors, even gaming console chips. They're spread across a lot of different markets. NVIDIA, on the other hand, is laser focused on AI.
So are you saying that AMD is spreading itself too thin, that trying to do everything might be holding them back in this AI race?
It's a definite risk. Diversification can be good, but it can also make it harder to compete in a fast-moving and specialized field like AI, where focus and, concentrated resources are so crucial.
Right. It's like trying to run a marathon while juggling 5 different balls at the same time. It's tough to give your full attention to any one thing. What's another hurdle AMD has to clear?
The software side of the equation. Nvidia's CUDA platform is the industry standard for AI acceleration. Developers rely on it. It's deeply embedded in the ecosystem. AMD's RMCM is making progress, but it's still struggling to gain widespread adoption.
So even if AMD develops like a superior chip, it won't matter much if developers don't have the tools and resources they need to actually build applications on it.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third challenge, the rise of ARM processors. While AMD is sticking with the x86 architecture, companies like Nvidia, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon are all investing heavily in developing their own ARM-based chips.
So is AMD betting on the wrong horse here? Is the industry shifting away from x86 towards ARM in the AR world?
It's a possibility, and it's something AMD needs to address strategically. They either need to demonstrate why their commitment to x86 makes sense in the long term, or be prepared to pivot if ARM truly becomes the dominant architecture in AI.
Okay, so we've talked about AMD's impressive revenue growth, but also about some significant challenges they face in the AI market. It seems like they have a lot to prove.
They do, but AMD is a resilient company with a history of innovation. They've overcome tough challenges before. The question is, can they do it again in this rapidly evolving AI landscape?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and to answer that, we need to dig deeper into the specific strategies that AMD is employing to catch up to Nvidia, as well as the potential risks and opportunities that lie ahead for both companies.
And that's what we'll tackle next in this deep dive. Stay tuned because things are about to get even more interesting.
So we've talked about, AMD trying to kind of break into this AI chip market, and Nvidia with this big lead.
Right. I'm sure our listener wants to hear, what are these companies doing to maintain that lead or to shake things up?
Well, one of AMD's key strategies has been this acquisition of Xilinx. They're a company that specializes in FPGAs. Those are like adaptable chips that could be reconfigured for different tasks.
So how does that fit into, AMD's ambitions in AI? I'm not really that familiar with FPGAs, to be honest.
It's a smart move, I think, on AMD's part, because FPGAs offer a lot of flexibility. They can be tailored for specific AI workloads, so they're really attractive for tasks like, data preprocessing and model inference.
So they're taking that Xilinx expertise with FPGAs and combining it with their own GPU technology, basically trying to offer a more versatile solution than NVIDIA's just GPU approach.
Exactly. AMD is betting that this versatility will appeal to some, segments of the AI market, especially those looking for more customized solutions.
Interesting. So it's not just about raw processing power. It's also about, finding these niche markets and offering these more specialized solutions.
Precisely. Now let's look at Nvidia for a second. While they are the front runner, they're not without their own vulnerabilities. Remember we were talking about those companies developing their own ARM-based chips. That's a real potential threat to Nvidia's dominance.
Right. Those big tech companies like Google's and Amazon, they're going the vertical integration route. Instead of buying NVIDIA's chips, they could just build their own. That's got to be a concern for NVIDIA.
Absolutely. Companies like Google with its TPU and Amazon with its Inferentia chips are already making some noise. Those chips are designed specifically for their own AI workloads and could over time, chip away at NVIDIA's market share.
So NVIDIA might be king of the hill now, but they can't get complacent. They've got some serious competition on the horizon.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic market and things can change so quickly. Another factor to consider is this whole open source hardware movement. It's about making hardware designs freely available.
I've heard a little bit about that, but to be honest, I think fully understand the implications. How does that impact companies like AMD and NVIDIA?
Well, it's still early days, but the open source movement has the potential to really disrupt the traditional chip industry. Imagine a future where anyone can access and modify chip designs. It could lead to a surge in innovation and lower costs.
So it's like the Linux of the hardware world, this collaborative approach to chip development that could challenge the big guys?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's a real wild card that could shake up the entire AI hardware landscape. It could even give smaller companies the power to develop their own AI solutions without relying on the big players.
So we got AMD trying to carve out its niche with FPGAs, and NVIDIA facing potential challenges from these vertically integrated companies and this open source movement. It's a really fascinating and complex situation.
It is, and for an investor like our listener, it means doing your homework is more important than ever. It's not just about looking at, today's numbers. It's about understanding the underlying trends that are going to shape this industry in the years to come.
So how should our listener approach this investment decision? Given all these factors we've talked about, what should they be thinking about?
Okay, well, first let's address the elephant in the room. Nvidia is the 800-pound gorilla in this space. They have a market share, the technology, the track record. If you want exposure to the AI boom right now, they're the obvious choice.
There's always a but, right?
Right. NVIDIA's stock price already reflects a lot of that future growth potential. It's not cheap. And with all this competitive pressure we've been talking about, it's worth thinking about, is their dominance really sustainable in the long run?
So buying NVIDIA is a bet that they can hold off these challengers and stay on top. What about AMD?
AMD's more of a speculative play. They're making moves to compete, but it's still uncertain whether their strategy will actually pay off. If they can successfully leverage that Sinex acquisition, get some traction with ROCM, and find those niche markets where they can really excel, they could become a serious contender.
So investing in AMD is a bit more of a gamble, but potentially higher rewards if they manage to pull it off.
Exactly. It all comes down to your risk tolerance and your investment horizon. If you're comfortable with higher risk and a longer-term outlook, AMD might be worth considering. If you prefer a more established player with a lower risk profile, Nvidia is the safer bet.
But the fact that Nvidia is already so dominant makes me wonder if this is the time to bet on the underdog. Sometimes those disruptors can really shake things up, like how Tesla came out of nowhere and changed the entire auto industry.
That's a great point, and it shows how important it is to not just look at the current leaders, but also keep an eye on those emerging trends and potential disruptors.
Right, because the most exciting returns often come from those companies that nobody saw coming.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed and be willing to adapt your investment strategy as the landscape evolves.
Absolutely. This deep dive has given our listener a lot to think about. It's not just about picking a stock, it's about understanding this bigger picture of the AI revolution and how these companies are shaping it. Feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about this whole field, right?
We've talked about record revenues and fierce competition and all these new technologies popping up.
But for me, what's really fascinating is how this all connects back to, our everyday lives.
Exactly. Like we started with this listener's question about whether or not AMD is an investment.
Right.
But this deep dive has gone way beyond that. It's really about understanding, the forces that are shaping one of the most transformative technologies out there.
And recognizing that this AI revolution isn't just happening in some, far-off data center.
Right.
It's already changing the way we work, the way we learn, even the way we interact with the world around us.
That reminds me of something I read about AI being used to develop personalized medicine.
Oh, yeah, that's a perfect example. Imagine a future where treatments are tailored to your specific, genetic makeup.
Or AI assistants that can anticipate our needs and help us manage our, increasingly complicated lives.
I know the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. And the companies we've been talking about today, AMD and Nvidia, they're really leading the charge on making those possibilities a reality.
But not just about those two companies, right? We've also talked about the potential for disruption from companies like Google and Amazon, building their own chips.
Right, and that whole open source hardware movement, that's a real wild card.
So where does all this leave our listener? Like, what's the takeaway message here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the AI landscape is incredibly dynamic. It's not static, it's constantly changing. New players, new technologies, new opportunities are emerging all the time.
So for an investor, that means staying informed is absolutely crucial. It's about understanding what's happening, identifying the trends, and being willing to adapt as things change.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been like a snapshot of the AI chip market right now.
But it's just a starting point.
Yeah, the journey of understanding AI and its impact on the world is definitely an ongoing one.
And we encourage our listener to continue that journey.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming.
You know what they say, the only constant is change?
And in the world of AI, that change is happening at lightning speed.
Well, we've reached the end of this deep dive, but the conversation about AI is far from over.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. We look forward to diving into the next fascinating topic with you soon.